and I don't have the memo in front of me right now, but a few weeks ago, I guess a few meetings ago, I'll say, the council considered the designation of 410, 412 as a historic landmark. That ultimately failed, although a majority of you voted to landmark that. It required a supermajority, so ultimately there was no landmark designation. As you know, we explored the transfer of density rights concept prior to you making that decision, and unfortunately could not find a workable solution there. However, we didn't want to just stop after that vote. We reached out to the property owner and said, is there anything that we could do that would lead you to voluntarily designating that as a local landmark? And the developer was more than willing to come to the table and have that discussion. And it turns out they may have an option to buy property directly adjacent to that. And if they can achieve a density that is higher than what is currently allowed in our code, they would be willing to potentially, they'd be willing to explore that with us. So what we thought we'd do today is have Danielle present to you a very rough framework. We don't have a proposal for you. We want to just put the idea out here, get your opinions, and hopefully get a nod from you on whether this type of solution that we're presenting would be workable. What we don't want to get into is a situation which was what we had with the transfer of development rights, where we spend a couple of months exploring this, the developer spends time and money exploring it, and then find out there's really no appetite for it. So we're not asking for a hard yes or no from you, but just generally if you're okay with the concept.
Good evening, Danielle Sisman, NDS. So I'm just going to provide a high overview of, and maybe a little bit of a refresher for where this property is. It's outlined here in yellow. The upper portion of this is the property that was previously considered for landmarking, and the lower portion is the area that the owners of the northern property are considering acquiring. That'd be in the 400 block of North Clinton Street. What they've proposed, just kind of very back of the envelope sketch, is a possible 4-story building composed of 3-bedroom units. We are guessing at about 20 units, and we're again kind of sketching out densities of 73 units per acre. This, again, like I said, is very preliminary. It could be more or less kind of as that discussion goes on. This is a view of the 410, 412 property. Again, the property just to the right of it on the screen here is the property they're considering, a view from the corner looking back towards it, a side view from the Davenport side of the block. Essentially, our comprehensive plan recommends a higher density in this portion of the city. 25 units plus is identified on the comprehensive plan. More specifically, in the central district plan, it's called out for high density multifamily, but that's kind of in the 16 to 49 dwelling units per acre. The current zoning is an unfortunate choice of brown and brown for 2 different districts here, but it's currently zoned RM44, which is this block here, and directly across the block is a PRM zone, which is a planned RM44. So it's in a neighborhood that does have higher density zoning currently applied to it and or adjacent to it. However, the city does not have a residential zoning designation for the 73 units per acre that the kind of concept sketch is coming out at as an RM44 property. This table kind of summarizes the basics of some of the maximum heights, which would be 35 feet, the lot coverages, and then a range of density, which is oversimplified here as if the building were built entirely of either 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom units. It would allow a density anywhere from 29 to 87 units per acre, depending on the mix of bedrooms actually built. And that potential rezoning to a planned RM44 or planned high-density multifamily would bump up that density somewhat, anywhere from 33 units to an acre to up to 100. Essentially, the planned high-density multifamily, or PRM, has similar dimensions as RM44, but it does allow for some flexibility in design to score or allow for greater density through height and lot coverage and things like that. Projects that would be in the planned high-density zone must demonstrate certain public benefits to achieve that flexibility, and that's accomplished through a point scoring system that's already built into the code. Essentially, those projects earn points according to this table based on the elements on the left-hand side: masonry, building materials, increased open space, preservation of historic buildings, providing assisted or affordable housing units, going above and beyond on streetscape and landscaping, and some specific designs for windows would earn points. And then those points are spent by the developer at their discretion on a table of available bonuses for density, essentially. So staff has looked at, or would look at, proposed looking at, if we were to rezone to a PRM, there would still be code changes that would be necessary in addition to the rezoning, essentially to allow for additional density above and beyond what a PRM would allow, doing that through several mechanisms that site dimensions, also looking at reductions in private open space. There would have to be some parking ratio changes, and then there would be an emphasis on design review. So that's just kind of the thumbnail sketch of zoning considerations, even to just kind of kick off some discussion.
Yeah, so if I could just at a high level frame it. So what we're really looking at here is a concept in which we maximize density on a 4-story building, with 4 stories being roughly equivalent to what Courier Hall is across the street there. So it would be a very narrowly tailored code amendment within the PRM zone. We would basically give additional density bonuses for landmarking of an adjacent property. More than likely, this would be the only case in which it would apply. But again, the developer would be able to maximize density with a 4-story building. And until we get into deeper discussions with the developer and they have a chance to do some preliminary engineering, we don't know exactly what that density will be. But as Danielle said, it could be 79, 80 or more units per acre.
Questions, folks?
If we had landmarked this property, the adjacent property, the developer would have lost the ability to develop a certain portion of the property. Is the loss in value of the landmark approximately equal to the increase in value that the developer will get here with the proposed rezoning? You don't have to do an exact figure, but is it roughly the same, or is it significantly higher?
I don't know that we've done that comparison. I know we compared some square footages just on the property to the north with those, but we haven't compared it to the.
You don't know whether it's a greater value than what would have been lost under the landmark. Okay. I also have a question related to parking. How much greater, if at all, is the parking going to be required with the greater density that's proposed here?
We wouldn't be able to know that until we had a specific mix of units that they would want to achieve. It could be significant. They're talking about potentially one lower level of parking available on the site, so that would not necessarily, that would require some additional parking ratio changes.
Right.
Yeah, so I think the developer would like to maximize parking on site underground, which is, as Danielle said, one level. It's not going to meet the requirements. So as part of this text amendment that we would have to create in the PRM zone, we're going to have to provide some additional flexibility with those parking standards.
On that point, one of the things I think about is I'm going to assume that the project would be oriented towards students if in fact it gets built. And that site is located on a CAM bus line. So that greatly minimizes the typical extent to which a person would need and use a private automobile. So I think we ought to take that into account as well. So are there other questions or observations?
What was when we were talking about this during the historic designation, there was some calculation of what development potential would be lost.
Yeah, and I recall that we did that calculation, but I don't know that I recall the comparison off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
We could get that to you.
An architect would be used as opposed to sort of a draftsman on this proposed site. Is that the plan? Is that your understanding? So it'd be a high-quality design?
Yeah, we haven't talked through specifically what design review would look like, but we have required design review there. I've mentioned that to the developer, whether that's staff design review or we'd involve historic preservation in looking at that because of the adjacent. We haven't really gone down that path yet, but if it's going to be a 4-story building of this mass and scale, I think design review is important. We haven't talked about architect requirements or anything like that.
And the current property would just be demolished, is that the thought?
Correct. The corner lot there on the lot, and the one on Davenport as well.
Has anybody in historic preservation been consulted to see if they really wanted to get that on the list of potential landmarks? I mean, the building that would be demolished. And if not, that's important to know.
Yes, we've reached out to the historic preservation planner to double check to make sure that the adjacent property was not already identified. I don't know that the HPC has had a chance to do any more research into the property to identify that, but it's not already identified on their list.
It's not on their priority list, I know that. Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that strikes me as being real important is the fact that Courier Hall is right across the street. It's, I think, 4 stories in height. It has a certain architectural appearance to it, which I think is quite admirable. And then there's the historic building that we want to preserve. So I think it'd be crucial to have high-quality design review with regard to any particular building that we proceed with. It could be a great asset to that area, and it could really undermine the area if the quality of architecture is really not compatible with those 2 existing buildings. And I don't mean identical with, I just mean compatible with. Any other thoughts, folks?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good about this, actually. I think, the movement, and we're seeing this, at least where we have form-based code. Form-based code is form-driven rather than unit-driven. So, we don't pay as much attention in those instances to what the actual units per acre are anymore. It's more what's the size of the building that becomes the critical concern. And as we've mentioned, I think the 4 stories the context seems to support that, as long as as you said, Jim, the quality of the building design is consistent with what we see across the street. I think it could be, and I don't know if improvement is the right word, but consistent with the character of the neighborhood and potentially a very nice addition, not to mention that we say 410, 412 Clinton.
Yeah, it gives us a viable pathway to accomplishing that.
Right. I mean, it's similar in some ways to, Tate Arms, right next door, which I think is one of the nicer buildings in Riverfront Crossings.
I think the owner did a great job with that
so
new
I think that's a good example of, well-designed. I think that's a 5-story building. So, yeah, I think this, we went through that whole TDR exercise and it didn't materialize, but we seem to have an opportunity right next door to achieve the same end.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the PRM would be a form-based code?
No.
Oh, you just mentioned the form-based code.
Well, I mentioned the form, in that, so we're establishing a maximum building height of 4 stories.
Okay.
I'm willing to have staff move forward and see if we can work something out. I think the design is important, as other people have said, given the location and the context. So, and I think the 4-story ballpark. And I think it's important that we look not just at 4-story, but at height in feet.
Right. Good point.
So just, I'm not saying it can't be higher than Courier if the main floor is a little higher, but should, in my opinion, should be somewhere in that same ballpark.
Well, I appreciate just having them come back to us with an option to even do the historic preservation as an option. I don't know that that's something that we'll typically see because they had all the right to do whatever they wish. So I do appreciate that opportunity. And I think this is what's been proposed so far sounds like it's worth looking into. And, you know, I'm looking forward to what comes out.
I think the other key point for me is that, you know, if we were looking at this area in the first instance, I don't know that I would want this level of density, but given where it already is in terms of density, calling for multifamily, it's already starting out, and they already have a right now to develop at RM44, correct? If we didn't change this. And so I think what this allows us to do, because I love that structure that's there right now, so I wish it didn't have to go.
It's a beautiful home.
I do love that structure. And I'm also always concerned, especially in our inner core neighborhoods, when we change that fabric. You know, I've talked about before in some of the other parts of some of our inner core neighborhoods, we didn't get that fabric quite right. But in this particular case, Jim, I think you bring up a very good point. Given its proximity to Courier, the student, that's a perfect place for that. High density. I'm willing to the extent that we can with our code, to reduce that parking footprint to the max feasible that staff think is necessary. And I appreciate the developer reaching out to us. I think that's a very good thing, where so often in our community we're sort of two ships passing in the night, and then we get all mad at one another and we don't actually reach out and try to resolve these. So I also want to really commend them for doing that. If it were another part of the community, I don't know if I'd be as supportive, but given its proximity, I'm going to be supportive of this. But I do really want that high-quality design. I really want to make sure that it's compatible with the adjacent structures, and that we continue to daylight this, and also preach staff daylighting this as early as possible, because it does involve a historic area, even though it's not formally historic, is my understanding. So I'm going to be supportive of it moving forward. And we also, of course, get to preserve the treasure that we were concerned about losing, which means a lot to me.
I think the bus piece is important too, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it, you know, it's in effect transit-oriented development. I mean, this corridor is a perfect location for reducing the parking requirement.
Yep. Okay, Jeff, I think you're getting a green light to proceed with further discussions with the developer. It looks like a reasonable solution on the face of it to us. So tell us more later on.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. That means we can move ahead to the next item on our agenda, which is clarification of agenda items. Does anybody want to draw attention to anything in particular? I note we're setting public hearings for the comprehensive plan amendment and for rezoning concerning the area around Forest View. That's a huge thing. It's been in works for a long time now, and I understand it went through planning and zoning. What, last Thursday? Is that when? Yeah.
Yes.
They voted 4-2 in favor of it, right? Yeah, so that's a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Very complicated project, too. I guess I want to mention item 9A, which had to do with the Eastern Iowa Community Bond Project. There was correspondence pertaining to that. And I just want to note that Jeff wrote, I think, an excellent response to an email from the bond project outlining our city council's and city government's perspective on the topic that they raised. And I would note as well that in 15 minutes, a vigil at Church of the Nazarene will be conducted. And I want everybody here to know that upon request from Pastor Tony Smith, I sent to him a statement to be read on my, and therefore really on the council's and city government's behalf, presenting our perspective about our distaste and so on for the scribbling on the side of Church of the Nazarene and other posters that have been displayed around town and that kind of thing. I just want to make sure y'all know that.
I don't see this on our, a part of any of our packets. It was the email from Greg Hearns about the, from the Iowa City Federation of
It's in the
Labor.
late handout.
It's in the late handout?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure when we should discuss that. I don't know if we can discuss it to a degree now, or whether we should wait until we get to the formal meeting and the motion about approving the budget.
Oh, down here.
So I'm kind of seeking some advice from Eleanor on that point.
Sure.
Yeah, I remember this one. I'm just trying to.
It's basically an email to us,
Yeah.
recommending a certain kind of action with regard to the temporary hourly employees, and asking us to take immediate action with regard to it. So it's a topic that we will need to discuss, but I don't know that,
Discuss it at
The work
budget-
session's
at the
appropriate.
Budget.
Okay.
yeah, okay.
I mean, you can discuss it under or agenda items now. I think it's related to the budget.
Do you want to, is it legitimate to discuss the substance or the process? Because he's kind of raising a
About it.
process question.
I think you can talk about it. You can talk about agenda items, and it's related to an agenda item. It's related to the budget.
I guess
Okay.
I have an understanding that he may be here for the formal meeting to give
Probably.
comment, so maybe we want to wait until after he comes to give comment.
But I don't have any objection to that, because we just need to discuss it before we vote.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll hold off on that.
Yeah.
Related to the can we discuss it topic, Mayor, you had brought up the question of taking a formal position on the, for lack of a better term, sort of solar tax that's considered before the legislature at this point. You included an article from Mid-American Energy.
No, it's not from Mid-American.
Oh, I'm sorry, from
It's
Bleeding
about-
Heartland about Mid-American's proposal in the legislature. Thanks for catching that. Is there enough notice here to substantively talk about that? Yeah. So that's where I wanted to, we'll defer then for next meeting. We don't have the 24 hours notice for public meetings purposes. That's the problem.
Right, and all I intended to do with that email is say, assuming we can do it before the legislature acts, that we should discuss whether we want the city to take a position on that particular bill.
So I'll bring that up at pending work session topics to the extent it's not moot by the time we bring it up in 2 weeks, or the next meeting. It may be moot.
Okay. All right. Any other agenda item questions? I don't have any. All right, let's move on to the info packet discussion, February 21st. That packet. Anybody want to bring anything up there?
IP2, it's funny when we have 3 weeks of a break. It seems like it was a long time ago. But yeah, I included that study that Minneapolis is doing on its snow removal procedures. And, you know, this past winter has kind of been the exception, but I think it highlighted, for me, the issues we have in Iowa City with snow removal. It wasn't until this year that I learned from a report in either the Gazette or Press Citizen that the snow mounds that accumulate on the corners are no one's responsibility, according to Stan Laverman, I think was quoted in the article, that because it's not generated by natural event, it's the snowplows that generate that snow.
Yeah.
It's no one's responsibility, which I hadn't realized. But in any event, what I would like to ask is if we could have this as a work session topic. I am interested in understanding better, what we might do. how we might approach this. I think it seems especially to me an issue in the central district where you have more people walking, that the conditions really break down. I mean, it's just not possible to safely walk through the center.
Well,
of
not just walking either, right? I mean, if you're in a wheelchair.
Oh, well, in a wheelchair, it's even worse. Yeah, if you're among the, vulnerable populations, elderly persons with disabilities, this winter, I can imagine, I was feeling housebound. I can't imagine how, a more vulnerable person would have felt. So, I found the report from Minneapolis interesting, especially, some of the, where they looked at what other cities are doing. So I think it's worthwhile having a discussion of how we can improve things, because I just don't think the current system is working.
This season, we certainly did hear from a lot of people within the community pertaining to snow. And Jeff has sent an email to council members stating that we currently are at 1,280 snow complaints for the season and ordered 368 times the clearance. And then just for a point of reference, 459 snow complaints is what was last year, and this year we're at 1280. So it has been a very hard and significant winter on our residents and people trying to walk throughout the community, as well as our city staff trying to keep up with all of the complaints, which my assumption is that this kind of took everybody in the moment by surprise with the consistent snow. So I appreciated what you sent just for some comparison, because I was definitely hearing the complaints from citizens within our community. And so we're not the only one that have some challenges when it comes to snow and ice. Ice is very difficult to manage.
Almost fell down 4 or 5 times this morning walking my dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think clearly crosswalks were almost virtually impassable in many parts of the city over the past many weeks. And the question becomes, what, if anything, can we really do about that? I don't know that we need to schedule a work session as such for it, but I would like to know what the staff thinks is possible to do, and what's being done in Minneapolis may provide a model for doing something somewhat differently from what we're doing now. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think a memo is a good place to start, and then
Yeah.
if we, need to go further.
That's what I had in mind.
Okay.
Anything else on that packet? Okay, February 28. IP2 listening post update from Kelly. Seems to me, given the schedule that Kelly lays out, we should schedule a listening post for late May or early June.
I want to be a part.
Kelly indicated, 4 or so suggested sites. One area we have not gone into over the past 3 years, I think, is the northeastern part of the city. So I'd suggest we try to find a place in the northeast, maybe at Blackstone's, maybe at one of the schools. I'm open, of course, to possibilities, but somewhere in the northeast. Anything else on that packet? I'm hearing a lot of silence.
Well, I did appreciate the notes from the listening post at the IMU, where concerns about lighting and transit service were highlighted. I think it gets back to the transit routes that we have, and are they adequate particularly where you have, with the students, they have a different schedule. So nighttime service, again, what I would call vulnerable populations, that sort of ties into the lighting question. I don't know where I would suggest we go on that, but they were definitely, I heard those concerns. I think they're valid concerns.
Okay. Okay, how about the March 7 packet?
I do have one item for there, sorry about that. And that's from the Community Police Review Board. There was an item that was suggested by one of the members that it was regarding the city policy on requesting council attendance at board commission meetings. And so I just wanted to just bring up that has come up for the Community Police Review Board, and they even mentioned if there was a way for maybe a council member liaison who could meet with the board member. So I'm not sure that's something that comes up often.
At every meeting, or?
It doesn't state at every meeting.
I think they're working on a proposal to go back to the board. There's a committee that's going to do that. It wasn't ready for this packet. They're also meeting tonight, so it'll probably be at their next meeting when they discuss it.
Great.
Okey-doke. All right, how about the March 7 packet?
On the March 7th, I guess I'll tuck this into the pending council work session topics. I sent out late last night to the city email this question of the parent drop-off at Horace Mann, and to try to simplify, I think, what I see the issues as being is the current plan has a proposal for parent drop-off on Fairchild, which would provide parking for what I estimate to be around 6 vehicles. That plan, as I indicated in my email, has some significant impacts on the entry to North Market Square Park. And so what I've suggested as an alternative approach would be to maintain parking on Fairchild for 3 vehicles, which would be 3 less than are provided now in that location, and a drop-off zone for 3 vehicles along the east frontage of North Market Square, and preserve the entry in between those 2 parking areas to the park, which also serves as an entry to Horace Mann from the south. So it's essentially, in other words, trying to identify a location for 3 parking stalls that would not, in effect, turn the entry into a parent drop-off zone along the frontage of the park. So we preserve 3 in the existing design, and then look at alternatives for the 3 that would be relocated. I'm suggesting they could be placed along the east edge of the park. In looking at some of the district's own documents, it included parking along that east side of the park as one option. But it doesn't have to be there. It seemed like that places the 6 more or less in the same location, but there are other possibilities where it could go.
So are we, I'm sorry. Tim.
So I'm
It's for work session.
I'm suggesting, that we schedule a work session to look at that in more detail.
Yeah, so it could be an item on the April 2nd work session, right? Because John's memo or email came a little bit late, just like mine about the solar interconnection net metering thing came a little bit late. But it seems to me to be appropriate to talk about that, see if the council has a view it wants to share, but we can't do it now. Yeah.
That's fine. I just want to make sure you're all aware It is part of the current plan that John referenced is part of an approved site plan. So the district has all the approvals they need to proceed. When we were out there looking at the site, John, it looked like they had utility locates done and the excavation area marked. So I just don't want anybody to be surprised if that work is already scheduled and happens before your next work session. We have shared the documents that John provided with the district and asked them to consider it, and they did and got back to me and said that they prefer what the approved site plan has. So you're free to talk about it April 2nd. I just don't want anybody to be surprised if work is done before then.
So we cannot request them to put a hold on that work?
We can request it, but
I mean,
I don't know what
We
impact.
can't compel it.
We can't compel it, thank you.
Well, given our desire to discuss it on the 2nd, it seems to me to be appropriate to request that they put a hold on it until we at least have a chance to discuss whether we have a view, about it and want to share that view with them.
When was the site plan approved?
June 18th
June 18th?
Thank you.
of 2018.
Then no, I would not. I mean,
June
this-
18th of 2018?
We're talking 8 months, almost 9 months since that site plan has been approved. I don't think it's appropriate at this time for us to be going back and asking them to potentially make changes or hold off on work that they may have scheduled.
Done on that?
Well, are there 4 people who would like to ask them to defer action until we have a chance to discuss it as a council?
Can we do that for public meetings purposes to deliberate as a body since we didn't get the 24 hours notice?
I think you can give brief direction to staff. I think that's okay.
About just asking them to
Yes.
defer their action until we have a chance to discuss it?
Yeah. We have to start being, though, a little careful about these late things that we're.
Yeah, so I'm
putting
not trying to
in,
get
and
us into a substantive
No.
discussion about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is the plan that I had sketched out is consistent with a significant portion of the...
John,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
John.
we're not
We-
going to have a
We're
substantive
not going to
discussion
have a
about it.
substantive conversation about this.
So what I'm wondering is, are there 4 people at the table right now who want to ask the staff to ask them to defer action until we have a chance to discuss it? And I understand you say no, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say no. And I would just encourage whoever has those thoughts to reach out themselves personally and have that conversation.
I'm going to say no. We can't get into details, but I think we're too close to September. I think that's the opening date. So
Okay, well, that decision's made. All right, moving ahead. Any other items in the March 7th packet?
I wanted to bring up IP4, pending work session topic, IP5, my own memo, and IP6, the memo from staff. Just a little bit of background in terms of what I'm proposing. As many people know, the community recently learned that the Lucky's grocery store is closing. Of course, many people in the community also know that the City of Iowa City does have a tax increment financing agreement with the developer and not with Lucky's. Tonight, I did not want to discuss all of the details. It's very difficult to get into the details. The developer may not wish to amend the existing agreement with the City of Iowa City, and if so, we would not be able to change it because we have an existing agreement. I think where council potentially would be able to weigh in the future is if the developer expressed any interest in modification. And so tonight, I just wanted to have a brief discussion about at least some things that I would like to see at least explored, and then have a discussion 45, 60 days from now. It may be that the developer does not wish to modify, in which case there's not a lot to discuss. But it does strike me that the original agreement requiring 30 3,000 square feet of grocery store space, frankly, was a mistake, and that I think staff should have additional flexibility to lower the footprint of the food-related store in that location. And secondly, at least to explore the possibility of a food-type market along the lines of a Nubo. It may be that the developer has no interest in that. But again, what I did not want to see happen is we're 3 or 4 months down along the line, we get a proposal and it's not really what we want to see, or we essentially could be repeating, in my view, the same mistake twice. So that's sort of what I wanted to do. I know a lot of people have expressed a lot of interest in this, and I think it would be helpful if there's that interest to allow more time to explore that as an opportunity and also to engage with them. Of course, the developer probably has a lot of details that would not necessarily want to get out of the public eye at this point. But again, I think in terms of our position, I think we should telegraph as much as we can at an early stage what we would like to see. So that's sort of where I'm coming from that.
If I can add, so going back and looking the history of this one, the grocery store was not something that staff insisted on at the time. That was the tenant they brought to us, and we put that in the development agreement. So what we have told the mall ownership group at this point is that we would be willing to consider any range of tenants that they bring, but the tenants have to be of a quality that is not only going to allow for their own success, but allow for the surrounding businesses in that neighborhood to grow and prosper as well. So it has to have a net positive impact on the entire kind of southeast region where that mall is located. But we have already signaled to them at the staff level that we are open to uses other than grocery. Obviously, that will require an amendment of the development agreement, and you will have a say. So if there are preferences that you'd like to express, it's important to get those to the mall ownership group as soon as possible.
That's primarily, Jeff, and I'm glad that you brought that up, is at least from my position, and I don't know if there's support on council for this, just as a first step, I would like to explore the food-related market concept. It may be that that's not feasible. It may be that the developer does not have an interest in that, and it may be that the alternative uses that you've explored and identified, and they may identify, prove to be more practical. But at least in terms of a first step, to me, this has a ton of potential. We have a template in Cedar Rapids. We have board members in the city of Iowa City that serve on that. And so I think there could be some real synergy with that area. Again, we can't cover all those details, but I'd at least see the first step to at least explore that. I want it to be food related, but not that. And so, again, I think it would make sense to give us a little bit more time to just signal this as an issue, see where we are 60 days from now, and hopefully be able to have a little bit more of a substantive discussion because we are early on, but I've said enough.
What I would suggest is I like the fact that staff has indicated to them that we're not wedded to a grocery there, but something that is positive for the mall and also kind of net positive for that whole part of the community, the southeast side of town. Obviously, hopefully something that helps generate foot traffic in there for the other businesses as well, but just positive economically for that whole region. To me, given that staff has already done that with the mall owners, what I would encourage, Rockne, is rather than us taking time to get into nitty-gritty, why don't you try and get those people who've done that kind of work and are on that board for Nubo connected with the mall ownership through Jeff and let them just start having some conversations.
Yep.
And
there's already been some discussion, but I think I didn't want to necessarily do that until council could signal that they even had any interest in at least exploring that as an option.
I don't think we need to get into that kind of nitty-gritty. I mean, I think if staff comes back and says, this is the proposal of who they're going to bring in, we feel that it's positive for that area, then and meets that various criteria, I guess I don't want to sit here as a council member and try and tell them, I'm not a retail expert, I don't want to sit there and try and second guess what businesses could go in there and meet the rent requirements that they have and help draw the foot traffic. So to me, if we leave it more general and maybe make those connections, if you're comfortable with that part of it, Jeff,
Yeah, I mean, we're going to do that anyway. Anybody that contacts us with an idea, we're going to put them in touch with the developer.
Well, I do love your idea, Rockne. I think it's, you know, the new boat concept, and I don't know their financials and how that
You
works
get some
for.
front money, too.
Okay, yeah, okay. But I mean, I love that community aspect of various vendors being in one location, like the new boat concept. So I would agree with Susan to, you know, have the developers connect with some new boat people and start having that conversation.
Putting them in contact with.
So no one
the
objects to me
developers is a good thing.
facilitating that with staff then?
Yeah.
Good,
Oh.
okay. Just wanted to be, okay.
perfect.
Okay, so I'm conscious of the time, and I want to make sure that before we get to the formal meeting, we have a chance to discuss the controversial Mormon Trek 4 to 3 lane conversion. I want to make sure staff has a chance to speak to us about it.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to propose one other thing, though, real quick. The next one on the agenda is deer management.
I don't think it'd go quickly. That's my concern. And we
Well,
have.
we've got staff here that won't need to be here for the rest of the meeting, except for that one item. It's-
Well, that could well be for the 4 to 3 conversion, too. I'm not sure about that.
I don't know, most of our street staff is here all night.
Well, I think we need to do the 4-3. So
I'd rather go deer management. What does everybody else want to do?
I'd agree 4-3. That's a big issue.
he's silent.
Come on, Bruce, come on, Bruce.
Hey,
They
Okay.
both
We
may be
lost
short.
Bruce.
It's an overwhelming
no
3 to 2
no
vote.
vote is a yes.
Or
Julie.
3-1-1 or something, I don't know. Okay, so with regard to which item is this? Item 9 in the March 7th packet has to do with the conversion of Mormon Trek from 4 lanes to 3 with bike lanes on either side. So Kent, would you be willing and able to, oh, no.
Kent must have been biking or something.
Abel's tougher
Yeah,
than
maybe
Willie,
he's
right?
not willing
Yeah.
and able.
I am
You did,
willing,
man.
Yeah, so I wonder if you could walk us through that memo.
Yeah.
And especially drawing attention to your responses to the factual claims that have been made by residents and other users of Mormon Trek.
Sure, be happy to. Kent Ralston, Transportation Planner. So in your info packet from March 7th was a memorandum from myself as well as the city engineer and senior engineer about the Mormon Trek 4 to 3 lane project. Just some quick background, this project has been at least discussed by staff to some degree for about 10 years and discussed by, I think, the council and staff more seriously for about 5 years when a Transportation Safety Improvement Program grant was received from the DOT in 2015. As far as the background goes, the original concept with the Transportation Safety Improvement Program grant was for a 4 to 3 lane conversion, or what's known as a road diet, essentially from Highway 6 to Melrose. A little shorter than that, but that's the essential bounds of the project. Since that time, the project has grown to some degree based on needed maintenance. So along with the 4 to 3 lane striping has been some work that's already been completed last year, and the engineering group can tell me if I missed something, but basically ADA curb ramp work will be done, pavement patching, overhead street light replacement, and traffic signal equipment replacement, as well as the recently installed northbound dedicated right turn lane at Benton and Mormon Trek.
So Kent, just quickly to clarify, in the question number 7, when the question was how much will the project cost, the 1.5 million is for all of that stuff, and only 30,000 of that 1.5 million is for the restriping to go from 4 to 3. Is that correct?
Correct. And I would also add that the restriping will need to be done regardless because of the pavement patching and the other work that's associated work. So that 30,000 really will essentially be spent regardless of if we stripe it the way it is today or stripe it as a 4 to 3 lane. And there might be some margin there, but yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, the project's grown, as Susan just mentioned, but again, the 4 to 3 lane part of it is very, very small. And in terms of maintenance, to give you an idea of of what we're talking about. Some of those maintenance activities may have been accelerated a little bit, but the fact remains that we've even had some overhead streetlights tip over in recent history, actually rot out and fall over. So, you know, this
Not
is,
on Mormon Track, but somewhere else, right?
no, actually
On Mormon
this would be the part of the project that's just north of Mormon Trek. So that is basically between the railroad viaduct and Melrose. So, I mean, a lot of this work is necessary regardless of the 4 to 3 lane project. It's all necessary regardless of the project. As far as the question answers, would you like me to go through those sort of one by one, or do you want me to just answer the questions you have?
Most of them.
Okay. Okay,
Because
so-
I think it's really crucial for the public to know that we heard the questions that
Sure.
have been asked.
Sure.
We've gotten the data that's necessary to respond accurately to the questions.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's start with number 1, because I think this is one that the council had some discussion on, I think, at maybe your last work session. There was unfortunately an error in the consultant study. So Snyder and Associates was hired to basically review the city's work and the DOT's work to make sure we're getting the project we need or the project we want. Unfortunately, there was a typo essentially where they had said they collected data January 12th. It's actually January 21st, in fact, when both public school and the University of Iowa were in session. So that's an unfortunate typo.
Kent, how can you verify that?
The data is actually included in the memo. So to the extent that it's actually the computer generated information that's got a date and time stamp on it.
Yeah, thanks.
Other than that, it might be hard to prove. But yeah, no, we're confident that Snyder and Associates did it when they should have. Further, that count itself was only used to validate the counts that the city had already taken. Some of them are a year or two old because it took us a while to get the data collected, and some of that was collected for the Traffic Safety Improvement Program grant applications. So basically what they did is they took a count and compared it to the counts that we had previously taken just to make sure they were close. You know, if they're within 2 or 3 or 5 or even 10% of the ones we took, they were confident then that our counts were good. Had they taken that count and said, oh, you know, we're 20, 30, 40% off, we would have had an issue. So that count was really just to validate the information anyway, but it was taken at a correct time. As far as, I'll just quick for question 2, in terms of vehicle collisions, the data is in the memo. The data we're seeing for collisions is pretty much, has pretty much not changed in the last decade. We're looking at between 30 and 40 collisions a year on that stretch of Mormon Trek. Average daily traffic volumes, there's been a question, you know, are the traffic volumes still what they have been, and can they still be supported by a 4 to 3 lane project? The answer is yes. They really haven't changed all that much in the last decade or so. So this is average daily traffic volumes on Mormon Trek. In fact, we were seeing a downward, sort of a downward trend in average daily traffic up until sort of recent times, and that's for Mormon Trek as well as the rest of the community. And we're well within the thresholds for what the Federal Highway Administration tells us works for a 4 to 3 lane conversion. They say upwards of 20,000, you really start to need to take a hard look at these. We're more in the 10 to 15,000 range. On the high end, it'd be 15. So we're confident that we're still well within that threshold. As far as the vehicle delay in the corridor, there was a study done by Snyder Consultants. We really don't think there's going to be a whole lot of additional delay. I would say in the magnitude of maybe a minute north to south or south to north during peak hours. But I think all along as we brought this project to the council, we've mentioned that 4 to 3 lane projects do add a slight amount of delay, or they can add a slight amount of delay, but it's just that it's very slight. So we're not concerned that it's going to become a major issue during peak hours. Let's see. Traffic diversion has been brought up by some of the community members that live sort of west of the project in the Shannon, Dublin, Tipperary area. And, you know, I don't think that's going to be an issue because we think the capacity is there on Mormon Trek, the actual theoretical capacity of the street to handle the traffic. However, we're more than happy to collect some data, and we will already collect some data pre-project to post so we can kind of see if there's a major uptick in cut-through traffic in that neighborhood. I don't anticipate it, but we'll definitely collect the data so we'll know. I think we've already touched most of the rest of these. How will we measure the success? I think we'll again, besides measuring cut-through traffic in some of the adjacent neighborhoods, or lack thereof, hopefully, is we'll also take a look at the level of service through the corridor. So we always talk about this level of service, A being good, F being bad. We can, at any given time, collect more data, go back and make sure the level of service is where it needs to be. I think we'll find that out quickly, because if it's not where it needs to be, we'll all hear from the public about that. So I think it'll become apparent, but we can actually go in and use some software and look at that again and make sure things are working for vehicles as well as pedestrians. But we don't anticipate any issues.
Thanks, Kent. I'm thinking about level of service, and that's a partial measure, isn't it? Because it measures the freeness with which automotive or motor vehicular traffic can flow, right? It doesn't take into account pedestrians, it doesn't take into account bicyclists, it doesn't take into account anything that could happen along the roadway, meaning any kind of economic development opportunities. It doesn't take any of that into account. It's just about traffic. So it's a valuable measure, but it's very limited.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. We can measure pedestrian level of service now as well. Primarily, we see these as good for pedestrians because you're actually not crossing as many lanes of traffic. But that remains to be seen, and that'll all sort of be, measured after the fact if we think it needs measuring.
Okay, and you have a paragraph in here as well that responds to the question, basically, what are you going to do if you discover it's not succeeding, that it's a real problem?
Right.
Right, so what's the answer to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if it doesn't succeed, it'll become very apparent to all of us very quickly. And along with our annual striping plan, so every year, either all of, or we try to get all of the city's pavement markings repainted, it can be restriped back to a 4-lane. I don't know this, but I would anticipate that, again, it's probably in the neighborhood of $30,000, but we would be doing that regardless, either as a 3-lane or a 4-lane. So if it's not working, we can shift back to a 4-lane section. We hope we won't need that, but that is always an option, and we've mentioned that to the council before. Same as what we had said on First Avenue, the recently completed project, is that if it doesn't work, we can always switch back, but we don't believe that'll be necessary.
Ken, we've talked a lot about the projected reductions in accidents as somewhere between 19 and 47%. We don't have data on the projected reductions in personal injury or fatalities, correct?
Right, yeah.
But do we have data in terms of how many personal injury accidents have already been there? And then presumably if we can do that, can't we then correlate that if there is, maybe not exactly, but if there's been X number of accidents in this time and we're expecting a 19 to 47% reduction in accidents, maybe that will sort of correlate downwards.
Yeah, that's how I would do it. I actually talked to the Department of Transportation's Office of Safety about this, traffic safety, and even they say every roadway is so much different, it's hard to predict the number of a reduction in fatalities, for instance. And in our case, fortunately, we don't have a lot of fatalities anywhere in the community, which is a good thing. So it's hard to measure those. But the actual severity of collisions is on attachment B in the memo, and it actually shows the severity of collisions. Primarily, they're property damage only. We don't have a lot of severe accidents, but also I would argue that any number of those accidents could be severe. So when we're reducing the number of overall accidents, you're also therefore presumably reducing the severity of those.
And is it
as well.
35 or 25 along there?
35.
35, yeah.
Any other questions for Kent?
If like the lights, during high traffic time, will the lights have longer green lights so that traffic can flow through, or will there be any adjustment there?
Right, so the whole corridor will be retimed as part of the project. The nice part about this is you've got that center left turn lane then, well, you'll actually get a protected permissive left signal. So all through the corridor, rather than sort of hanging out there in traffic, if you're hanging left turn, you'll actually have refuge, and that's the major plus about a road diet. Yeah, but the whole corridor will be retimed, and that's another benefit. So because the timings now might be a little bit stale or a little bit off, so to speak, we hope that we won't, with the offset and a little bit added delay because of the 4 to 3 lane conversion, we might actually make that back up again with the added northbound right turn lane that adds capacity, and then also the retiming of all the signals.
And are those lights censored? Like when you get to it detects your car and then
Correct. Right. They're video detection, so it looks like a little camera. They're not actually recording anything, but they're actual video detection.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Anything else? Thanks so much, Kent.
Thank
It's
you.
been very helpful.
Thank you.
Maybe we have time to do the deer management.
Okay.
So that would be, what, item 8? No, item 7.
7, I think.
Item 7, deer management. Jeff, are you going to speak to us about this?
I've got some good backup in the audience if needed. You know, we've been working on this for about a year now, and we've been struggling to get the approval that we had hoped to get from the state of Iowa. So twice in 18, we applied for a sharpshooting permit from the Natural Resource Commission, and twice we were denied. You have a memo in the packet from me that I had a lot of help with putting together from the staff who's been working on this, and that's Captain Bill Campbell and Assistant City Attorney Sue Dulick, who are both in the audience. The short of it is, after the denial in December, we have had conversations with Department of Natural Resources staff who work with the commission. Again, the commission is a politically appointed body, so the staff, just much like we staff commissions, that's the role of the DNR staff. They give us the best guidance that they can, and the guidance that we have received is contained in the staff memo there. Essentially, we think that it is plausible that they will approve a one-time sharpshoot if we commit to a 5-year management plan that includes some type of hunting, presumably bow hunting, but that they will not permit any long-term plan that is reliant on sharpshooting beyond year 1. Because some members of the public have asked about sterilization, we also inquired about that as an option, and we're told that is very unlikely that we would get approval for sterilization. That actually does not come from the Natural Resource Commission, but from the DNR director. So state code gives the authority on sterilization to the Department of Natural Resource Director, and the feedback that we got that it is highly unlikely that the DNR director would ever allow a sterilization option. So really, I think there's a couple of paths. There's always the do nothing path, which in this case is becoming tougher because of the explosion of the deer population we've had in the last couple of years. So I think really what we need is some input from you, some direction from you on whether you would like us to proceed with another application to the Natural Resource Commission that would include a sharpshoot in year 1, followed by public hunts in year 2 through 5. And we don't have details on what those public hunts would look like, where they would take place. We would work with DNR staff. We would look at Coralville, Cedar Rapids, other cities that do it, and put one together that we think is right for our community. But without that piece, I'm not sure it's worth going back to the NRC. So that's kind of where we're at, and hoping to get some direction from you.
One of my questions when I looked at this is, and I don't know that you've gotten an answer from them on the target population. They indicated that the 25 per square mile was too high. I mean, if we put together a 5-year plan and say, okay, we'll do 1 year sharpshooting, and we don't have the right weather, we don't have whatever, and we can't begin to get it down to that 25 per square mile, anything I've read, and I think there was stuff in either your memo or theirs, that you're not really going to decrease the population with like bow hunting. You might sustain it. I mean, you might be able to keep it even, but if we're still at, say, 25 and they want us down to 18, it would seem like we're not going to make progress with that. So I guess part of my question is, one, if we don't reach that goal in year 1 of the sharpshoot, what are they going to give us flexibility to have more than 1 year sharpshooting to get it down to that target level? And number 2, I don't think we had a single person come in front of us that had any appetite for bow hunting in town.
No.
Nobody?
I can't, the second piece aside, the first piece on the goal for deer reduction, you're correct. We did get feedback that 25 deer per square mile is too high. don't have a magic number that we would land on, but it's probably under 10 is what they would suggest.
How do they expect us to get there then with just 1 year of sharpshooting?
Well,
It's a rhetorical question.
I think we'd have to work
I
with,
mean,
we'd have to work with our
I don't think we
contractor
know the answer to
to try to get there. But what I would say is, I think probably our best option would be to proceed with that hunt in year one with a commitment to hunt, and then we're going to have to do annual counts. And if those annual counts prove that we didn't get there, and those hunts, we don't believe the hunts are going to really keep us at that level, much less make progress towards it, then at least 2 or 3 years down the road, we have data to say this just isn't working, and could potentially convince them at that point to go back to a sharpshoot. But I don't think we have the standing with the NRC to go there and really make a case for anything beyond what they've kind of hinted they would approve.
Jeff, and to me, the big question is this. Are we going to expect, I'm not a deer hunter, but are we going to expect that if deer hunter is shooting with a bow and arrow, there is not an immediate kill, is my understanding, in a typical deer hunt, unless I'm mistaken. Are we going to have injured deer running throughout our community and bleeding as we try to track down? Is that a possibility?
I think we would structure the hunt to try to minimize that possibility. Is it a possibility? Yes, particularly if we're hunting in and around residential areas. Like
where would the
Hickory Hill Park.
locations be?
Well, we'd have to get into that. What I can say is in Coralville, in Cedar Rapids, I don't think they have that problem, but again, every city is going to be different because your hunting areas are going to be different. So we would need to look for hunting areas, be it public or private, that would minimize the chance of wounded deer walking into somebody's yard.
So I guess what I would like to see, even though we don't have a great opportunity to do it, is I would like you to at least see and explore the sterilization option. I don't think sterilization is ideal, but I at least would like you to explore that, because frankly, I did not want to see deer hunting in the city limits. And I'm frankly outraged that we're having this sort of problem. None of us wanted to do the deer hunt. I think that's clear in the sense of we all viewed it as a tremendously tragic thing that we had to do, but we were concerned about human life. And so this commission is inhibiting our ability to protect our residents from, from danger. So that's going to be my vote.
I'm not interested. Yeah, I'm not interested. I think the information we got from White Buffalo, and he's the wildlife biologist and works all over the eastern part of the country, at least, that sterilization would not work in this environment. I mean, you just have too many deer in and out, and all it takes is one buck that you don't get, and you got 40, 50 does impregnated or more. I mean, so they were going to spend, what is it, $1 or $2 million to try and sterilize all of them on an island, Staten Island. And again, all you got to do is get one buck swimming across the river, and there go all of those plans. So I think the idea of sterilization, from what they said, and just, I mean, I grew up in a family of hunters in Vermont, and deer travel, and we don't live in any kind of an isolated environment that that they indicated would be at all practical for sterilization. So I just don't want to have staff wasting their time on it.
Yeah, I'm pretty skeptical
Experts.
about sterilization, too, for precisely that reason. But I'm wondering if we do a sharpshoot in the first year and get below whatever the target is in terms of density, why do a bow hunt the next year unless we know that the count and density have increased? Why would they want us to do that? So it would seem to me you do a count, and if the count shows there's growth in the density and it's a problematic growth, then do something different the second year after, skip a year and then do that
I think it's
year.
viewed. I think there's a pretty safe assumption that the population will grow, and they look at the hunt as trying to maintain your numbers, not necessarily continue to draw them down, but maintain them. And then you do the counts every year to make sure that you're able to maintain. But I don't think that they, I think if they said, well, if you're just going to wait a couple years, you're going to find yourself right back in the same population, or in the same.
Okay, so here's another topic for me. And many months ago, Jeff, I shared with you a recommendation from a friend of mine who lives in a rural area, and he says basically, don't just let anybody go out there and start using a bow and arrow and try to hunt for deer. Have some kind of way of, I don't know the verb he used, but some way of sort of culling the people who would be permitted to go out there and do some bow hunting. So if we can set something like that up, I think that makes it more tolerable, because otherwise I just hate the idea of.
Could we have professional bow hunters? I mean, that's a good point, Jim, actually. Could we do a professional bow hunting organization to do it?
I don't know if that's been breached. Bill or Sue, would you mind helping me out on that one? Did you hear the question?
Yeah. Bill Campbell, Police Department.
Hi, Bill.
I think the answer to that's going to be no. They're really very, very protective of the private hunter, the non-professional hunter. We got no sense that there would be involving a professional in those years 2 through 5 was really not an option. It was going to be a public,
any of those commissioners, do any of the commissioners live in cities?
I don't know the answer to that. It's a commission of 7. I do not know where they are from.
It just seemed to me, in reading some of the documents we've seen from them, it just seemed like a very pro-hunter approach, not so much concerned about what our issues are in the urban area, really, but more of a pro-hunter approach.
The idea, and we were very specific in asking this question of staff, it really needed to be a public event in years 2 through 5. So to have it be a private sharpshoot in year 1 was acceptable, but to have it be a private hunt, if you will, was not something that was specifically addressed.
Does anybody here have a magic wand?
It's a hard one.
It's ridiculous.
I'm not willing to go forward and commit to a public hunt. I think which means we don't do the sharpshooting, which
I think we
very
have to
frustrated.
do, we have to do the sharpshooting. I mean, the population.
Well, let me finish. I mean, I think I was here for the public forum on the deer hunting. And I will tell you, of the 40-plus people that were here that night for the public, every single one of them said, regardless of what we ended up doing, well, I won't say everyone. There were a couple hunters here. Yeah. Do not do bow hunting. It was incredibly, incredibly strong view of the people that came. I would say there were maybe 2 exceptions of people who spoke publicly in favor of bow hunting. Everybody else was typically, some were in favor of the sharpshooting, some wanted, to try and sterilize, et cetera. Some didn't want any shooting, any killing, no matter what. But there was 98, 99% of the people do not want bow hunting. And I respect that opinion, and I don't like the idea of not doing a sharpshoot because the population is just incredibly large, but I will not support a commitment to public hunting.
I guess for public hunting, if Coralville is doing it, I haven't heard any negative things about bow hunting personally from Coralville. Definitely, sharpshooting, I mean, it's not ideal, but I think we do need to respond to the deer population. I guess if we say yes to this, the bow hunting is kind of along with the package still. I guess we don't have to do it if we don't want to, but.
I mean, one thing I've kind of gleaned from the memos was, first of all, that the counts with the sharpshooting would come way down, which I think means the remaining population is significantly less than I think we were anticipating. And I was also, while I didn't really care for the idea of hunting either, in reading the memo from DNR, I felt more open to the idea that, managed hunts of a much smaller population, which is done, from what I gather, all over Iowa, may be a possibility. I was at least open to having that discussion to see if managed hunts, especially with the idea that we'd be working off a population that was significantly reduced, would be worth considering.
And I still have that question, is will 1 year of sharpshooting give us a significant enough reduction? Because I know at least 1 year that we had the sharpshooting, they didn't get anywhere near their goal in terms of the numbers. So that still comes back to my question of what happens if we have that first year and we don't really get anywhere near where we want to be.
We have not approached White Buffalo with that question specifically. I think your observation is accurate, but we have not specifically asked White Buffalo, if we were to ask you to get to this level, would you be able to do that in 1 year? How long would it take? What would cost be? Any of those questions, we have not asked those questions.
Okay, thank you.
So it seems to me we're pretty stuck. If I understand correctly, we clearly need to do something with regard to managing the deer population in our city, but our public is overwhelmingly against doing what the state is telling us we must do. So
I guess I'm tracking Susan on this. Should this be a mayor write a letter to them and express our concerns? I mean, this is about protecting human life.
I don't know that would get us very far.
It may be, but it's sort of here I stand. I mean, it's just sort of the only reason we're doing this is to protect human life. That's it. And we're letting essentially a lobby affect our ability to be able to do that for sport hunting. And I support hunting in certain places. I'm outraged that we don't have this tool and that we're essentially in a position where we have a situation where we cannot address a peril that affects our residents. I don't know that we have, I'm not going to support bow hunting.
All right, here's what I want to suggest. I don't know if the rest of you will go along with this, but given the time, 16 till, I suggest that we let this sink in until after the formal meeting, when we'll have to come back to the work session anyhow. I don't think Bill needs to be here. I don't think Sue needs to be here. But we'll have time to process the discussion that we've just had and then see if we have some clarity about what we 5 people think should be done.
I would also suggest that we might want to put this on an agenda for our next meeting in terms of getting this out to the public that we're having this conversation, because a lot of people don't read the info packets, they read agendas.
I agree with that.
And so if they didn't happen to go through the info packet, they wouldn't necessarily know that we were having any kind of a substantive discussion about this issue, the deer population issue tonight. Right. So I would encourage that we think about coming back. Is that an issue if we wait till early April? Is that a problem?
I think the next opportunity to be on the NRC agenda was April. But we're really looking at a hunt in the fall or winter of next year at this point. So
yeah.
We've discussed this, staff has, and I think that it would be reasonable to think that for us to have some request to them by fall is really what we need to be shooting for. To go any later than that into the winter would probably not be wise. Right. But to do any type of sharpshooting at this point is probably unlikely until we'd be looking at something in the winter next
so we
winter.
can revisit this at our next meeting on April the 2nd, right?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that, and I think Susan's exactly right. The public needs to know how we feel trapped in a situation that is not of our making and is not there's no good resolution to it.
And get more input from them.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay, it's 14 till or whatever, so let's take a break and we'll adjourn the work session till right after the formal meeting.
voice from above.
Hello.
Hey, Pauline, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Coming in loud and clear. Hope, can you hear me on that end?
Yes, ma'am.
Good, perfect. I'm ready to go.
Okay. So we need a city clerk. All right, we have one. Okay. I'd like to call to order the special formal meeting of Iowa City City Council, March the 12th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Cole.
Here.
Mims. Here. Salih. Taylor.
Present by conference call.
Teague.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Throgmorton.
Here. So for the benefit of people watching on TV or here in the audience, I'd like to note that Mazahir Saleh cannot be with us. She is in Tunisia right now upon invitation to participate in some significant event there. So we're very proud of Mazahir being given that offer. All right. I'd also like to note that rumor has it winter might be ending soon. I don't know what it's doing outside, but, you know, is it raining? I don't know. Yeah, raining now. I saw a weather forecast saying that there would be a chance of 1 to 2 feet of snow out in the upper Midwest. So let's consider ourselves a little bit fortunate. Okay, item 2, Student Leadership Awards from Helen Lemmy Elementary. So we have 3 awardees, Joel Brown, Honora Kauke, and Jolie Loughran. So I don't remember your first names. Joel, okay, so, and Jolie? Yeah, all right, we'll start with you, Jolie.
Okay.
Okay, so we're very proud of the, this is not, doesn't sound like it's on.
Just checked that. It is on.
Yes, is it on?
Now it is.
Good deal. Okay, so we can all be very proud of these 3 students from Helen Lemmy School. And what I typically do is ask you to read your speeches, and then I read the Student Leadership Award, which says exactly the same thing for each of you. It just has your names in your particular awards. So we'll start with Jolie, all right?
Okay. Hi, my name is Jolie Lauren. I'm a 6th grader at Lemmy Elementary. I first want to thank my classmates for voting for me. It means a lot to win a leadership award that is voted on by my classmates. I also want to thank you for having me here. I've been a member of K-Kids, Safety Patrol, and Student Council at Lemmy. I also play volleyball and softball. I believe that a leader can mean several things, and how you can become one can also be different. I think my class chose me because I am kind to everyone. I help out when I can with students, kindergarteners through 6th graders, as well as my teachers. To me, being a leader is being respectful, trusted, and empathetic to others, even when I do not agree with them. I know that respect is very important, so I try to respect everyone's ideas and feelings. I try to be a good role model so I can be a good leader. Thank you.
All right. See our terrific city clerk turn the volume on the microphone up. Thanks for doing that, Kelly. All right. All right, Joel, you're next.
Hello, my name is Joel Brown. I would first like to say how honored I am to have been chosen for this award. This means so much to me. I feel like why I was chosen for this award is that when we have indoor recess or other times, we may not be supervised, but I continue to be quiet and act as if there is a teacher in the room. I feel like I have also been able to help many people in math and other subjects, and I have also tried to be my best to be kind and not leave anyone out. Thank you.
All right, fabulous. So math can be really rough, can it? So the fact that you're helping other kids learn math, that's great. Bravo. I took 3 semesters of calculus in college, and in my 4th semester, I withdrew passing. Okay, Honora, you're next.
Hi, my name is Honora Cloakey. I'm a 6th grader at Lemmy Elementary, and I'm honored to be picked for the annual Leadership Award. To me, leadership means someone is respectful, responsible, caring, and a trusting friend to everyone, even if they aren't specifically their best friend. It doesn't matter who, but a leader delivers everyone the same undivided respect. They work hard with everyone. Then again, a leader doesn't have to be any perfect being. A leader doesn't need to be the smartest in the class, but they need to be willing to learn. A leader doesn't need to be the most popular either, but they need to be willing to meet new people. They will fix their mistakes appropriately when they make them, because a leader will never be perfect, but they will try their best to be as good as they can. That's why anyone can be a leader. It just takes a bit more work, but a lot pays off. That's why I want to say thank you to any leader out there who works hard every day to make some sort of change or positive impact. And thank you to anyone for finding me fit to be a leader among my peers. It's been great being here, and thank you again. Have a wonderful evening.
Done. You know, it's amazing how a good leader can be good at one thing and not so good at another, and then some other person could be a great leader in one thing but not in another, and leadership's dispersed in that sense, so bravo. Okay, beautiful speeches, all of you. So let me read the Leadership Award for you. And again, it's identical for each of you. Student Leadership Award for your outstanding qualities of leadership within Helen Lemmy Elementary, as well as the community, and for your sense of responsibility and helpfulness to others. We recognize the 3 of you as an outstanding student leader. Your community is proud of you. Presented by the Iowa City City Council, March 2019. So, Honora? Cheers. Well done. So I know there's some proud parents back there, there's some proud parents over here, and some proud, where's the other set of proud parents? I know they're out there. Just for the heck of it, raise your hands. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. You have wonderful kids. Okay, thanks to all of you. So. Okay, item 3 is proclamations, and there are 3 proclamations to read tonight. The first is Special Olympics Month. So Joyce, I guess you're going to accept this proclamation?
I am. Our athletes are busy getting ready for their competition this weekend.
So we're not going to see them?
We aren't tonight, I'm sorry.
Well, let me read the proclamation, and
Thank
then you can speak, right? So, whereas Special Olympians have a strong desire to compete and win, and whereas Special Olympians know that bravery is measured in setting goals and attempting to reach them, and whereas Special Olympians recognize the joy, pride, and self-worth, humility, and disappointment inherent in organized competition, and whereas Special Olympians appreciate the benefits that healthy competition and physical activity can bring, and whereas Special Olympians give the entire community a chance to gather and share in their spirit of accomplishment, now therefore I, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2019 to be Special Olympics Month in the city of Iowa City, and urge all citizens to commend and support the activities of the Special Olympics.
Thank you so much. Brad Barker, who is the Iowa City Park and Rec Superintendent, would like to accept this on behalf of our athletes. 50 years ago, Eunice Shriver started Special Olympics. We serve over 14,000 athletes and unified partners in the state of Iowa. Our competition this weekend, I take great pride in and feel very special that we are the only competition that once our athletes arrive in Iowa City, they have no expenses. We have a banquet for them on Friday night. We have breakfast for them on Saturday morning and a lunch for them on Saturday. It's through our fundraising efforts, which is the Polar Plunge, which I invite you guys to every year, but nobody showed up yet. March 30th of this month, we will be having our Polar Plunge at the reservoir, and Tim Dwight is once again our celebrity plunger, and Tim always makes it real exciting.
Tim is Tim, right?
Exactly.